Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Between the Eers. It is the morning after West Virginia defeating Arizona 31-26 out there in the desert. A nice performance from backup quarterback Nicco Marchiol, going 18 of 22 for 198 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Both throws were really impressive. The first one to Hudson Clement in the back of the end zone, he had to really kind of fire it in there. Really good catch, too, by Hudson Clement to be able to get a foot down, have control of the football, and to be able to catch it. I mean, he had two guys kind of draped all over him, kind of pushing him towards the outside or the back end of the end zone. So really good job there by Hudson to hold on to that football and come down with it for the touchdown. And then obviously the second one, the 54, 55-yard bomb, whatever it was, to Traylon Ray was a thing of beauty. The way he stepped in the pocket, he felt the pressure, took one step up, and delivered a strike downfield. Traylon Ray did the rest. Really good things that I saw out of Nicco yesterday. He looked calm, he looked poised, he looked confident from the very first snap. And I think the offense did some really good things to help him out along the way. I said going into it, they had to be able to run the football. Didn't really run it maybe as good as I thought that they would have. Jaheim White did most of that damage on the ground. He had 90 plus yards. CJ still kind of bottled up. I don't know what the deal is there. He has been really struggling these last 3 weeks. And I'm still a huge person with going with CJ first. I think if you deliver the big guy first, it's going to wear out on that defensive front and open more things up for Jaheim. I think they need to switch that up here in the final 4 games of the season, but I don't know if that's going to happen. It seems like this is the way they're going to play. Is CJ's role dwindling? I really don't know. That's something that we can talk about more so on Tuesday, but obviously we've got to talk about Nicco and the quarterback situation first and foremost, because it's going to be a hot topic over the next, 10 to 12 days, probably, with the bye week now here. There's going to be some time for fans to sit on this performance by Nicco and think, well, he should be the guy. And in some ways, I can't disagree. You know, Garrett has really struggled throwing the football this year and has made a lot of really bad decisions with it too. Now, of course, not all of those interceptions that he's got to this point are on him. Some of them are protection issues, some of them are on the receivers, and then there's maybe a one or two that were just really good plays by the secondary or that they were just kind of bad luck things that happened. But there are several other throws that probably should have been picked off that he's had that were not. So it all kind of evens out. That's why usually the numbers never lie. And Garrett has just not been an efficient passer. He's not been effective throwing the ball downfield, maybe as he was last year. Part of that could be because of the run game not being as explosive, but he just is what he is at this point. Like I don't know what he's going to be able to do in these final 4 games to show, hey, I'm a 60% completion percentage guy. We haven't seen it yet. Neil talked about it, the last couple of weeks, and what keeps pointing back to his damn performance against Albany. No one cares. It's Albany. 72% against Albany. I mean, you could argue that hell, that may even be low. There'd be quarterbacks against FCS opponents that complete 90%, 85%, 80%. So I'm not sure that bragging about a 72% completion percentage against an FCS team is something to pound your chest about. He's got to do it in the bigger games. He's got to do it against quality people. And it's kind of been the same story for the team as a whole. When they play teams that are better than them, they don't show up. They're not as effective. They're not as sharp. There's a lot of issues defensively, which I'll get to here in a second as well. But Garrett Green in those games has not shown up. I'll tweet this out later today, but I have a feeling, and I partially know because I did it after the first two or maybe three big games. His numbers in those games are pretty dreadful. His completion percentage is really bad. His touchdown to interception ratio is really bad. Now, it is for the season, of course, too, but those games in particular, when you need your best players to play their best football, he is just simply not shown up. And I'm not saying that Nico would come in and maybe change the outcomes of, say, the Penn State, Pitt, Iowa State, Kansas State games, but I do think that he could, and this is speaking hypothetically here because no change is going to be made, but I do think he could put you in better positions from a pass game standpoint. He's not going to put the ball in harm's way probably nearly as much as Garrett will. He still will because he's young in terms of experience, and those things are going to happen. But he's a more refined passer. He's a more, this is more of his background than it was for Garrett, who was just really a baseball player playing quarterback in high school. And it took him a really long time to figure out how to read zone coverages, how to read man coverages, how to read the defense as a whole. Nico is going through that transition as well because the way that they ran their offense in high school didn't really set him up well to make that quick transition to college, but he's just a better passer and he has a better understanding, I would think, coming a better understanding of the game coming into college than maybe what Garrett did. And I just think that he's going to be able to do some things in the pass game that, quite frankly, you're just never going to be able to do under Garrett Green. So, what does this boil down to? Is there quarterback controversy, or is this Garrett Green's job the rest of the way? It's Garrett Green's job. You can like it, love it, hate it, disagree with it, pound your table for Nico, but it's not going to happen. There's not going to be a quarterback change, assuming that Gigi's healthy. This is Garrett's football team. I'm not saying that's what it should be either. Personally, I started questioning whether or not he should be starting the games midway through, well, I guess leading up to his injury in the Kansas State game. The two interceptions, he was throwing 50 some percent, and then the question was asked in the post game, and Neil got a little fired up about it for whatever reason. It's a valid question. The dude's struggling, and I thought it would make sense to go and see what you have in Nico. And I didn't say it had to be a full-time change, but just in that game in general, and even going back into the Iowa State game, you're down three scores, Neil. Like, no one said you had to make a full-on quarterback change, but when you're down three scores in the fourth quarter, no one's saying that there'd be anything wrong with pulling your starting quarterback in that situation. So I don't think that we're going to see a change because Neil is 100% committed to Garrett. This is the kid that helped essentially save his job a year ago. And with four games left, I'm just throwing the odds out here. I don't think it's very likely that he's going to make that switch to a guy that's a redshirt sophomore, has very, very little starting experience and experience in general, and say, help me keep my job. Right? I don't think that's going to happen. You're going to continue to ride with the guy that helped you essentially just get to this season. And whether that's the right decision or not, I don't know. We'll see. But I do think Nico gives you a lot more in the passing game. You lose a lot in the running game, obviously, because Nico's not the same athlete as Garrett. He can use his feet, but I don't think we're really going to see Nico run the ball much, even when he does become the starter. This is going to be still a very RPO based offense, but unless there's pressure, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of quarterback designed runs. But speaking of the defense, I wanted to touch on this too before I got out of here. Jordan Lesley, I've got some questions, and I've had questions for several weeks, just like everybody else. But as I mentioned in the post game show last night, Traylon Ray a more of a pass rushing linebacker, more of a run stopping ish linebacker, was tasked to cover the best receiver in college football, Tetaroa McMillan, not once, but twice, with no help over the top, no help underneath. Why does this happen? I have no idea. The first one was a big, big play down the field. It didn't get into the end zone, but it was pretty close. Got him inside the 10, inside maybe even the 5, if I remember correctly. Second one did result in a touchdown. Now, as I mentioned on Thursday, you can't go man to man on McMillan. And honestly, I'm surprised they even did that at all. If you go back earlier in the game, I think this was still in the first half when it was still close before West Virginia kind of opened it up a little bit. There was a third down and goal situation, and I can't remember exactly the play and what happened, but it didn't go to McMillan. But McMillan's in man to man with Garnett Ollis. Third down and goal. Why? This is what I am very concerned with the defensive side of things because the awareness is just not where it needs to be. Why do you have a an up and down corner in Garnett Hollis? I mean, I know he's technically been the most productive, but why would you even go man to man coverage in that situation? Third down and goal, why not throw it to him? If I saw Tet McMillan over there with one guy on him, I'm throwing that ball that way 10 times out of 10. I'm not even looking anywhere else. So that's a problem. Then you have the two instances with Trey Lathan. You'd think that you would have learned from the first big explosive pass play to not have that situation happen again. And for some reason, it happened again. Trey Lathan tasked with covering Tet McMillan downfield. I don't see it being an issue with Lathan being the guy for part of the route and then passing him off to a safety. There's no issue there. But when you don't have that help over the top and you're asking Lathan to run downfield and cover that whole deep center field of the field, that is just that's a decision, is what it is. All right, that's just a decision, and I don't know how you put your linebacker in that position twice. This game is about putting players in position to succeed. Coaches talk about it all the time. Yet defensively, it has not happened all season. Now, have they done some good things? Yes. They've stopped the run game fairly well for the for the most part of the season, but the pass game is just still an issue. And there's no you're not going to be the only team that gives up massive amount of yardage to Tet McMillan. That dude is just a beast. He's going to get his yardage every game. That is going to happen. But you can't help the guy out. You can't help him out by putting him man on man on a third and goal situation. You can't help him out by giving them two opportunities with Trey Lathan covering him in pass coverage deep down the field. That's just not going to work out. You have to be situationally aware of what's going on. And those plays, and there are others, that really hurt West Virginia through the air. It's got to get fixed. Jordan talked about it it may have been after the backyard brawl. And he said, it's simple fixes. It's easy fixes. It's things that can be fixed. Not exactly the wording maybe that he said it, but the way he alluded to it was that this was going to be a fixable issue. And through what were you, 8 games now, it's still an issue. When you're 8 games in Brother, I'm sorry, but you are what you are. There is no fixing this. So that's an issue, whether that's from a recruiting standpoint, a developing standpoint, a play calling standpoint. I mean, heck, maybe there is some fixing it. Maybe that he's putting guys in the wrong position. And if that's the case, then what's that say about Jordan Lesley? Or if he's calling it wrong, or maybe he should be like calling things differently. Again, what's that say about Jordan Lesley? And I've got several questions already in the mailbag for this week, which will release tomorrow on the website at SI West Virginia, about basically if Neil does enough to keep his job down the stretch here, if Jordan would still be here. I'll go more in depth on it in the mailbag, but I'll keep it short and sweet right here. If that happens, if Neil keeps his job, Jordan will be the defensive coordinator. Very simple. You want more of an explanation for it? It'll be out there on the mailbag tomorrow. Lastly, the only other thing that I really wanted to kind of talk about here very quickly was just kind of where this team is through 8 games. 4 wins, 4 losses, 4 wins against teams you should beat, 4 losses against teams you were picked to lose by against, and you got some games coming up where it's Cincinnati's probably better than anticipated. You have Baylor, who really struggled at the start and is now getting better. You have UCF, who was good at the start and is now sliding. So you have two teams kind of going in different directions there, but are kind of average football teams right now, which is something West Virginia really hasn't played yet. They played really good teams, really bad teams. They've not played just an average team. We saw what happens when they play good teams, saw what happens when they play bad teams. What happens when they play an average team? I really don't know. We're about to find out. And then Texas Tech started out the season good. They've lost 2 straight. Don't really know where their season is going to be heading. But I will continue to say this. Neil Brown has to beat quality people. You're not going to be able to do that the rest of the season outside of maybe Cincinnati. And even then, if you beat them, they've got 4 losses. So, what has to happen for Neil to keep his job? Honestly, probably not much. And I know that's not something that you guys want to hear because most of you believe that this is not the right coach or the right regime for this program. But I'm just telling you how I'm seeing it. That buyout is massive. They don't want to deal with it. They truly believe that if they just continue to give Neil more time, that this thing will turn. And they'll point to the schedule. They'll point to the teams that they lost to and their record instead of looking at the record that really matters and the record against those top 25 teams. But what I will say is for Neil to gain any trust from this fan base this season, he's got to win out. Sounds crazy, but it is possible. The schedule is less strenuous in this final month of the season than it has been the first 7. I'm not even counting Albany, but it's possible. If they do win out, they go 8-4. You win the bowl game. You're the exact same team you were a year ago. And it's hard to remember because you had the hot start last year. What was it, 4-1 or something before the Hail Mary BS happened, and then you had the horrible punt returning situation against Oklahoma State, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're 4-3. I think a lot of people forget this team was 4-3 through 7 games last year. They got hot at the end of the season. There's a chance, there's a runway, there's a scenario, there's a path for this team to do that again. Not saying they will, not saying that they should, but they can. The schedule sets up for them to. And if they go 8-4, Neil's not going anywhere, regardless of what they do in the bowl game. But it gives the fans a little bit of hope. Not saying there's a lot, just a teeny little bit. And that can go a long way in helping with recruiting and helping building the trust, so on and so forth. But moving on into the future, again, it's going to come down to, can Neil get his team ready when the stage is big, when the lights are bright? Can Neil Brown coach this team to competitive football to be one of the top teams in the Big 12 conference? I I don't know. History says probably not, but maybe something changes. That's going to do it for me here this morning on Between the Ears. I'm Schuyler Callihan. Make sure you smash that subscribe button here on our YouTube page at West Virginia on SI. Give us a follow on X at SI_WVU, and be sure to send in your questions. The mailbag will be open all throughout today. I'll start answering questions in the morning on my article. So go to my X account at Callahan_. You'll see I'll pin the tweet there for you to go ahead and submit your questions for this week's mailbag. I answer every single one of them. Last week we had probably 45, 46 questions. I ended up answering 29 because, well, guys, I can't put profanity in these things, right? So there were some questions that had to be withdrawn due to the foul language. So keep it G rated and you'll have your answers on Monday. I promise you. I answer every single question as long as I can include it in the mailbag. So if you keep it G rated, you can be mad. You can have your emotion in the tweet, but just keep it G rated. All right. You keep that promise, I'll keep mine. So thank you guys for tuning in for another edition of Between the Ears. We'll be back on Tuesday and Wednesday, even though there's no game. Also, no walkthrough game day show this week since there is no game to preview. But just Tuesday, Wednesday of Between the Ears this week, and then back to our normal schedule the following Tuesday as we lead up into the Cincinnati game. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Take care.